Hello, Bremer County and all of Iowa. This is Shawn and Emily coming to you with our Deciding Iowa discussion, where we will give an update on legislative actions and consider the impact locally and for Iowa generally.
Hi, I'm Dr. Shawn. I'm a cancer scientist, biochemistry professor, school board member, and former House District 57 candidate.
And I'm Dr. Emily Bavers. I am an OBGYN, a mother of 3, and a reproductive freedom advocate.
Well, Emily, let's first mention some notable bills that didn't make it to the second final.
Sounds good.
Sandy Solomon's assault on public libraries thankfully lost some steam.
That is good.
It is. Her bill to restrict library access to enrich Iowa funds if they are dues-paying members of a nonprofit, specifically the American Library Association, is dead. Also not alive is her bid to end obscenity exceptions for librarians and educational institutions.
That's wonderful.
Alive is Sandy's bill that would have revamped our home schooling system. That particular bill, among other things, would have done away with caps of non-related students being in the same home, as well as allowing for tuition to be charged. So all of that, hopefully, will not come back.
Hopefully, we can hope. Also not alive are such gems as making sure we don't have chemtrails here in Iowa, or to purchase the lower counties of Minnesota, which was possibly even more far-fetched than to buy Greenland. Asking vaccine manufacturers to waive immunity, and a bill that would have banned genetic-based vaccines. So, Shawn, I'm really glad these bills are no longer alive, and I really hope we don't see them resurrected.
It's painful to consider the legislature and those of us who track bills had to spend so much time and energy on these and other questionable proposals when so many good pieces of legislation, like those addressing housing shortages and labor needs, never saw the light of day because of partisan politics.
It's so true. Let's mention a few bills that did not survive the second funnel that I wish would have. One was the Work Without Worry bill, would have removed income and asset caps for Iowans with disabilities on Medicaid. With these caps still in place, these Iowans will continue to be limited in their career development and personal holdings out of fear of losing essential health services.
Yeah, Emily, a bill I wish was still alive is House File 723, which have required water treatment plants to test sewage sludge for forever chemicals, or PFAS,
right.
and notify landowners if the sludge destined to be spread on fields contains PFAS. The House Environmental Protection Committee didn't take it up, and as an Iowan and cancer research scientist, I am concerned at the accumulation of forever chemicals in our environment, and disappointed that this didn't move forward.
Absolutely.
Although House File 639 is still alive, as it is technically past Senate committee, I am extremely disappointed that the Iowa Senate Republicans did so much altering of the eminent domain language of this legislative piece and added amendments that favor summit, including striking a change to the definition of common carrier. So unfortunately, I don't think Iowa landowners had the support they needed from the Iowa State Senate.
That's too bad, and especially with so many people united on that. One other piece I was hoping would move this year was House File 82, which would have required new single-family or two-family residential construction to include passive radon mitigation systems. It failed to make it through the second funnel. Iowa has the highest percentage of homes in the country with actionable radon levels, about 76%. And radon is the leading cause of lung cancer for non-smokers, estimated to have caused about 400 lung cancer deaths per year in Iowa. We need more legislation and appropriations to pick up the pace on our fight against cancer in Iowa, and this bill seemed like a no-brainer to me.
It really is. It's the second year in a row it didn't make, and it doesn't make any sense why they can't push that piece of legislation forward.
Yeah.
One last bill that didn't make it forward either was House File 861, which would have allowed the Iowa DNR to consider water use permit applications on a case-by-case benefit. We might have remember talking about that earlier. Mm-hmm. Well, this bill was sent back to the Iowa Natural Resource Committee, and I've said it many times before, water conservation and safety is a paramount issue for Iowans in their health, recreation, and economy, which is... Emily, let's shift and talk about bills to watch that are still alive.
Sure. So House File 623 and its companion bill, Senate File 445, are the governor's bills to encourage preschool and child care partnerships. and it would create a $16 million grant program for preschool providers and child care centers to tandem that preschool and child care together. And it offers child care assistance to child care workers and improves preschool quality standards.
All good things.
There's some amendments that are probably forthcoming, but in my everyday work and my own family life with young children, I see the importance of high quality and reliable childcare, both for families and for children. And early childhood is such a formative time, and the kids learn so much during those years. So I'm really glad to see this piece move forward. So thumbs up, Iowa, on that one.
Yeah, for sure.
On the other hand, House File 571, which was passed by the full Iowa House, would allow healthcare professionals, institutions, and payers to not provide or pay for any health services that go against their conscience. So I talked about this one in a prior episode as well. And there are some exceptions for emergencies, and the bill states these entities cannot be held civilly, criminally, or administratively liable if they say in good faith that they did not provide a medical service that was against their beliefs. This is a bill that uses conscience and good faith as more important than following evidence-based healthcare practices. And as we mentioned before, it gives insurance providers an opportunity to deny you coverage. Thumbs down, Iowa.
Yeah, well, in the parlance of Star Wars, I've got a bad feeling about this.
So true. Senate File 304 and House File 384 were both placed on unfinished business, meaning that they are technically still alive. These would kind of remove an exemption currently in Iowa law that allows minors to get vaccinations related to the prevention, diagnosis, or treatment of sexually transmitted infections. And so this really primarily would affect the human papilloma or HPV vaccine. This basically means that teens who are interested in getting the vaccine and maybe are seen alone in the clinic because they don't have a parent who can come with them or have a parent who disagrees with them can't consent themselves to receive this vaccine. Now, this one's close to my heart. I worked on HPV research before going to medical school, including on the FDA trial for the vaccine. And so I know how safe it is. I also know how effective it is in preventing disease because the trial had to be extended several times to get endpoints. It was so good at preventing cervical cancers, vulvar warts, anal and oral cancers. About 90% of the population is estimated to be exposed to some sort of HPV during their lifetime. And so I really wish that some of my patients who are undergoing repeated procedures and screening exams for these precancers or warts could have a say in this bill. The vaccine is such an effective and safe way to prevent disease. And I really think that teens should be able to opt in to protect themselves from cancers and warts in the future. I hope this bill doesn't decrease our vaccination rates for HPV here in Iowa, but I'm afraid it will.
We'll have to keep our eye on that one.
Yeah, I'll get off my soapbox now.
Well, one controversial bill still alive is Senate File 615, and that would require certain Iowans on Medicaid to prove they are working at least 80 hours a month to keep their coverage.
Right.
You know, those in support of the bill say if you can work, you should. And I don't disagree with that,
right.
But there are some issues. There are concerns that the bill's exceptions list is incomplete. Another is that this proposal, if enacted, will cost Iowa a lot of money to administrate and track, as in more than it will save.
Right.
This work requirement approach has been tried before, most notably in Arkansas, where it turned out to track all of the work requirements cost the state tens of millions of dollars more than they saved in removing people from Medicaid.
Doesn't make sense.
So this bill has a great potential to not be a money saver for Iowa and will create a large burden on the Medicaid population, who will be required to constantly prove that they are working or volunteering 80 hours per month to remain enrolled in Medicaid. You know, the worst part of this bill, Emily, is that Iowa has to submit for approval from the federal government for the work requirement program, and if the feds do not grant this exception, the language of the bill triggers the closure of the Iowa Health and Wellness Plan. Now, this would leave 180,000 Iowans without access to Medicaid. That trigger language reminds me of Lord Farquaad from Shrek, the very caricature of poor leadership when he said, Some of you may die, but that is a sacrifice I am willing to make.
It's so true. It's not funny, but it's true.
Emily, some laws are already on the way to the governor's desk, or soon will be. We all know about the governor signing the law to remove gender identity from the Iowa Civil Rights Act. Nothing says freedom to flourish like not supporting a person for who they are.
Right.
What else is at the finish line?
So Governor Kim Reynolds' bill to set a statewide minimum policy banning the use of cell phones in K through 12 classrooms. House File 782 has been approved by both chambers, but the Iowa House must still approve an amendment from the Senate before it's ready to be signed by Governor Reynolds. A handful of school districts have already moved in this direction, and a number of others have been trying to figure out how they want to best implement this ban once it's part of Iowa code. And, we're supportive of limiting distractions in the classroom. We want our kids there to learn. This bill is also supported by the Iowa Teachers Association and the Iowa School Board Association, so it's got broad support.
It's a good bill.
Yeah. Also, Senate File 22 was recently signed, which means we can be fined for driving while using a handheld cell phone or other electronic devices outside of voice-activated or hands-free models. I'm happy to see this law, knowing full well that I will have to be really mindful of how and when I use my own cell phone. I really struggle with navigation, so I got to make sure I get that set up before I go into drive.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. As we close, any other legislative action that you want to monitor these last few weeks?
Well, we have to mention that it's almost 2 months past deadline, but the state has finally let schools know what their funding budget will be. And they passed a 2% increase in spending authority. That is a 2% per pupil spending increase. With that small of a bump, a school district could actually have less money than the year before if their student population drops enough.
Wow.
That's a hard thing to budget for when you're just months away from a new fiscal year. Whenever a school finds itself in that position, Emily, something called a budget guarantee from Iowa Code 257.14 kicks in. What this means is a school district can levy additional funds to bring their budget up to 101% from the year before. Think of it as giving a school a 1-year grace period to recalibrate their spending because of declining enrollments.
Right.
The thing is, when a school district levies these additional funds, it is through local property tax. This year, with only a 2% increase, 159 school districts in Iowa, over half of them, will need to go on budget guarantee. That is a horrible, no good number that signifies a crisis in school funding. The expected price tag of all these school districts going on budget guarantee is $25 million in extra property tax, just so the schools can keep their lights on and their teachers paid. Let me put it another way. The state of Iowa's underfunding of public schools is causing more property tax for many of you. And the state of Iowa has put themselves in a position to underfund schools not just this year, but for the foreseeable future because of the albatross of a budget deficit the Republicans have created. And as we've said before, Emily, that hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in budget shortfall comes from the combination of lost tax revenue, a stagnant economy, and the $300 million funneled to the voucher program. Former Governor Robert Ray would be beside himself if he was alive to see how Iowa has devolved and slipped in education. Emily, I'm Iowa born and raised. This is my state and home, and I hate what's happening with our health, economy, education, and rights. I heard Senator Amy Sinclair, the Republican Majority Leader, recently said that Iowa is on track to becoming a destination state. For what? To get cancer, reduced unemployment, labor rights, and a 7.25 minimum wage? We have to take valuable time off work just to drive miles to see a specialist or a dentist who will actually take Medicaid, assuming that remains an option. Don't let them bullshit you. Their view of our state condition and direction does not match many Iowans' realities and our hope for the future.
I am fighting every day for the Iowa that I believe in, but man, some of these days are pretty hard.
I know, but you're not alone, and we can change. Be well, Iowa.